The wind caught her skirt in front of a Millionaire's CEO, but his reaction shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The wind came without warning. 1 second, the outdoor plaza felt calm and polished, the kind of place where champagne glasses clinked softly and polished shoes stepped carefully across stone tiles. The next second, a sharp gust tore through the space like a blade, snapping banners, rattling glass doors, and lifting her skirt before she even had time to react. She froze. Her hands moved too late. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people laughed nervously. Others instinctively raised their phones, screens glowing as they pointed straight at her most humiliating moment. Her face burned. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She was not supposed to be here like this. She was not a guest. She was not important. She was only filling in for a last-minute assignment, standing near the edge of a high-profile corporate event, trying to stay invisible. Her dress was simple, old, carefully pressed that morning in a small apartment, miles away from this place of money and power. She had checked the weather twice before leaving. The forecast said clear skies, no wind. But forecasts do not protect you for moments like this. The gust hit again, stronger this time. She stumbled back half a step, panic rising, her mind racing with one desperate thought. How do I make this stop? How do I disappear? Then something blocked the wind. Not a wall, not a curtain, a man. He stepped in front of her without hesitation, his movement fast and deliberate, his body turning sideways to shield her from view. In the same motion, he shrugged off his suit jacket and held it up, creating a barrier between her and the staring crowd. There was no announcement, no dramatic gesture, just action. The fabric of the jacket settled around her like a shield, warm, solid, real. The noise around them changed. The laughter stopped. The phones lowered. Conversations died mid-sentence. People stared now, not at her, but at him. The man did not look angry. He did not look flustered. His expression was calm, controlled, almost cold, the kind of composure that made people instinctively straighten their backs. He did not touch her. He did not speak loudly. He simply held his position, blocking every line of sight, his presence making it clear that whatever entertainment the crowd thought they were about to enjoy was over. She stood behind him, shaking, fingers clutching the edge of the jacket. For a brief second, she felt something unfamiliar in a moment like this. Safe. Someone near the front muttered something under their breath, a careless comment, a dismissive laugh, the kind of sound people make when they think no consequences are coming. The man turned his head slightly. That was all. The look he gave the crowd was not loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the air. The plaza fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting. No one knew who he was yet. They only knew that something about him demanded respect, and they were about to find out why. The man did not move right away. He stayed where he was, his back to the crowd, his body still angled just enough to block every wandering eye. The jacket remained lifted, steady in his hands, unmoving despite the restless wind that continued to sweep through the plaza. Behind him, she struggled to breathe. Her chest rose and fell too fast. Her thoughts tangled and loud. She focused on the simple things, the texture of the fabric between her fingers, the faint scent of clean wool, the solid shape of someone standing where she could not. She had never met him before today, and yet, in that moment, he was the only thing keeping her from breaking apart. "Take a breath," he said quietly. His voice was low and controlled, not rushed, not panicked. It was not a command. It was an anchor. She inhaled, then exhaled, trying to match his calm. The world behind the jacket felt distant now, blurred and muted, like noise fading behind a closed door. Another gust of wind tore across the plaza, but this time it did not reach her. His stance shifted slightly, instinctive, practiced, as if protecting space came naturally to him. Someone nearby cleared their throat. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward, irritation clear on his face. "We are in the middle of an event," he said, glancing between them. "This is becoming a distraction." The word stung. Distraction. as if she had chosen this, as if humiliation were entertainment. She tensed, her grip tightening on the jacket, ready for the apology she had already begun to form in her head. She would say she was sorry. She would say she would leave. She would take the blame if it meant making the eyes go away. But before she could speak, the man in front of her spoke again. "She is not a distraction," he said. His tone did not rise. He did not argue. He simply stated it, firmly, like a fact that required no debate. The suited man hesitated, clearly unused to being spoken to that way. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to respond. The silence stretched. Around them, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. People looked at each other, sensing that whatever this moment was, it was no longer casual. The phones that had been raised earlier stayed lowered now. The man glanced back over his shoulder, just slightly, checking on her. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "I think so," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry. I did not mean for this to happen." "You did nothing wrong," he replied. The certainty in his words made her pause. No hesitation, no politeness, just truth, offered without condition. He lowered the jacket just enough for her to step closer, keeping himself between her and the crowd. With careful movements, she adjusted her dress, smoothing the fabric down, securing it with fingers that still refused to fully steady. When she looked up again, she realized how close he was. Not invading, just present. Up close, he did not look flashy. No exaggerated gestures, no loud confidence. His suit was well tailored but understated. His expression was serious, focused, the kind of face that noticed details and remembered them. "Stay here," he said softly. "The wind will pass." As if on cue, the gusts began to ease, the banners settling, the air calming. The suited man who had spoken earlier stepped back, muttering something under his breath. Others turned away, pretending to resume conversations that no longer felt natural. The crisis, at least for the crowd, was over. But for her, something had shifted. She handed the jacket back, reluctantly. "Thank you," she said. "You did not have to do that." He took it, folding it over his arm instead of putting it back on. "Yes," he said calmly, "I did." And in that moment, as the plaza slowly returned to motion, she realized that whoever this man was, he was not someone who stepped in by accident. He was someone who chose to. She stepped away once the crowd began to thin, her pulse still racing even though the danger had passed. This was supposed to be a simple shift. 4 hours of standing near the edge of a corporate plaza, handing out programs, answering polite questions, staying out of the way. She had taken the assignment because the pay was good and the timing fit between her classes and her second job. Nothing more. Nothing like this. She moved toward the side corridor near the catering tables, her shoes quiet against the stone. Her hands shook as she tried to smooth the fabric of her dress again, even though it was already fixed. Old habits. When something went wrong, she fixed it twice, then checked a third time. Her name was Claire, 24 years old, temporary staff, replaceable. She had learned early that the safest way to survive spaces like this was to be invisible. Smile when spoken to, apologize quickly, never draw attention, especially not among people who wore watches that cost more than her yearly rent. Behind her, she felt his presence before she heard him. "You should sit for a minute," he said. She turned, startled. He had followed her, though he kept a respectful distance, stopping a few feet away instead of closing the space between them. "I am fine," she replied automatically. "I really am. Thank you again. I will not cause any more trouble." The words came out fast, practiced, the kind of sentence she had said many times before in different forms. He frowned slightly. "Why would you think that?" he asked. She hesitated, then gave a small, careful smile. "Because that is usually how this goes." He studied her for a moment, as if weighing something he did not say out loud. "You were assigned here today?" he asked. "Yes," she nodded. "I was called this morning. Someone else could not make it." "And you agreed anyway," he said. "I needed the hours." There was no shame in her voice, just honesty. A server passed by carrying a tray of glasses, glancing at Claire with faint curiosity before moving on. The plaza buzzed again now, but quieter, more restrained, like everyone had collectively decided to pretend nothing unusual had happened. The man leaned one shoulder against a stone pillar, relaxed but attentive. "You know," he said, "most people would have walked away." She looked at him, confused. "Walked away?" "Yes. When the wind hit, when the crowd reacted. Most people would have turned their backs and told themselves it was not their problem." She swallowed. "I did not have that option." "That is exactly my point," he replied. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard she carried, the thin plastic edge pressing into her palm. "I am used to being careful," she said quietly. "Careful people do not get noticed." He shook his head slightly. "Careful people often get overlooked." The words landed heavier than she expected. She glanced toward the plaza again, then back at him. "You did not," she said. "You did not overlook me." "No," he agreed. "I did not." There was a pause between them, not uncomfortable but full. She noticed the way people passed him differently now, subtle glances, respectful nods. No one interrupted, no one questioned his presence back here. She noticed something else, too. He still had not put his jacket back on. "Here," she said suddenly, reaching for it. "You should take this. I do not want you getting cold because of me." He handed it to her instead. "For a moment," he said, "until you feel steady." Her protest died in her throat. She held the jacket again, feeling its weight, grounding, familiar now. She took a slow breath, then another. "I am sorry," she said, softer this time, "that people were cruel." He met her gaze. Cruelty usually says more about the crowd than the person standing alone. She did not know why, but her eyes stung. She blinked quickly, straightening. "I should get back to my station." "Yes," he said. "You should." He paused, then added, "But if anyone gives you trouble, you come find me." She nodded, unsure why she believed him. As she turned to leave, she did not know yet that this moment, this small act of protection, was only the beginning. She had just not learned who he was. Claire returned to her assigned position, but the plaza no longer felt the same. Every step she took carried a new awareness, not just of the crowd, but of how she existed within it. Conversations brushed past her like distant waves. Laughter rose and fell. Music played softly through hidden speakers. On the surface, the event had recovered its polished rhythm. Underneath, something was unsettled. She stood near the registration table again, hands folded neatly at her waist, posture straight. She did exactly what she had been trained to do. Smile, nod, offer directions, blend into the background. But eyes followed her now. Not openly, not obviously, just enough for her to feel it. A woman in a designer dress leaned toward her companion and whispered. A man glanced at her, then quickly looked away when she met his gaze. Someone behind her laughed too loudly, the sound sharp instead of warm. Claire kept her expression neutral. She had survived worse than whispers. A few minutes later, a sharp voice cut through the low hum of the plaza. "Excuse me, you." She turned. The event coordinator stood a few feet away, tablet pressed against her chest, lips tight with irritation. Her smile was fixed, professional, and thin. "Yes?" Claire asked. "We need to speak," the woman said, already walking away as if compliance were guaranteed. Claire followed her toward a quieter corner near the stage equipment. Each step felt heavier than the last. "I understand accidents happen," the coordinator said without looking at her, scrolling on the tablet. "But what happened earlier disrupted the atmosphere of the event." Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then spoke carefully. "I did not intend for anything to happen. I checked the weather before I arrived." "That is not the point," the coordinator replied. "Perception matters, and perception was damaged." Damaged. Claire felt the words settle into her chest. "I am sorry," she said, the reflex automatic. "If you would like me to leave early, I can." The coordinator finally looked at her, eyes cool. "We will see." Before Claire could ask what that meant, the woman's expression shifted. Her gaze moved past Claire's shoulder. Her posture straightened. "Good evening," the coordinator said, suddenly warmer. "I did not realize you were still on site." Claire turned slowly. He stood a short distance away, hands relaxed at his sides, expression unreadable. He had removed his tie, the top button of his shirt undone now, but there was nothing casual about the way he held himself. "I am," he said. The coordinator smiled too quickly. "We were just addressing a minor issue." He looked at Claire, then back at the coordinator. "Is she needed elsewhere?" he asked. The question was simple. The weight behind it was not. "Well," the coordinator hesitated, glancing down at her tablet. We were considering adjustments to staffing for the remainder of the evening. I see, he replied. He stepped closer, not toward Claire, but into the space between her and the coordinator. Not aggressive, just present. She was assigned to this position, he continued. She fulfilled her role. The incident was environmental, not behavioral. The coordinator's smile faltered for half a second. Of course, we just want to ensure everything reflects well on the brand. Then we agree, he said calmly. Public shaming does not. The air seemed to tighten. I would never, the coordinator said quickly. He held her gaze. Good. There was a pause. Then the coordinator nodded. Of course, please excuse me. She walked away without another word. Claire stood frozen, heart racing, unsure whether to speak or breathe. He turned to her. You do not need to apologize for existing, he said. Her throat tightened. I am sorry if I caused trouble for you. You did not, he replied. You revealed it. She did not understand what he meant, but the certainty in his voice stayed with her. Around them, the plaza continued, as if nothing had happened. But Claire knew better now. This man was not just someone who stepped in. He was someone people stepped back from, and she still had no idea who he really was. The evening moved forward, but the tension did not leave. Claire stayed at her post, doing her job with careful precision, yet every sound felt sharper now. Every glance carried weight. She could feel the aftershocks of what had happened ripple through the crowd, subtle but undeniable. People knew something had shifted. A group of guests approached the registration table, laughing softly, their voices smooth and practiced. Claire greeted them, handed out programs, answered questions. Her tone was calm, professional. Inside, her nerves still buzzed. One woman lingered longer than necessary. She looked Claire up and down, her smile tight. You must have had quite the moment earlier, she said lightly, as if commenting on the weather. Claire kept her expression neutral. It was unexpected. I suppose, the woman replied, though events like this usually have standards. The words were polished. The intention was not. Claire felt the familiar instinct to apologize rise again. She pressed it down. Standards apply to how people behave, she said evenly, not to the weather. The woman blinked, clearly not expecting an answer. She laughed, a sharp sound, and walked away without another word. Claire exhaled slowly. Across the plaza, she caught sight of him again. He stood near a small circle of men in tailored suits, listening more than speaking. When he did speak, others leaned in, not out of fear, but attention, the kind that came from knowing that when he talked, decisions followed. She wondered who he was, a sponsor, a major investor, someone important enough that an event coordinator backed down without argument. She tried not to look at him again, but her eyes betrayed her. Their gazes met briefly. He gave her a small nod. Not reassurance, acknowledgement. As the night deepened, the program shifted toward its main announcement. Lights dimmed slightly. The soft music faded. Guests were directed closer to the stage area. Glasses refilled, conversations hushed. Claire stepped back, folding her hands, becoming part of the background again. That was when the murmurs began. She heard her name whispered, not spoken directly to her, but around her. A few glances, a few pointed looks. Then a man she had not seen before approached, wearing a staff badge that did not quite sit right. There is an issue, he said quietly. Management would like to speak with you again. Her stomach dropped. Now? She asked. Yes. She nodded, already bracing herself. They moved toward the same side corridor as before, but this time, more eyes followed. This time, it felt less private, more deliberate. The event coordinator was waiting, arms crossed, expression tight. We have received feedback, she said. Some guests are uncomfortable. Claire stood straight. Uncomfortable with what? With distractions, the coordinator replied. And attention. Claire held her gaze. I am doing my job. The coordinator opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Footsteps approached. The man was there again. This conversation seems repetitive, he said calmly. The coordinator stiffened. We are handling a staffing concern. Are you? He asked. Or are you responding to pressure from people who believe humiliation is acceptable entertainment? A few nearby guests pretended not to listen. No one left. Claire felt her heart hammer. She had not expected this to become a spectacle. This is not appropriate, the coordinator said. We have donors here. "So do I," he replied. The words hung in the air. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone whispered his name. Someone else inhaled sharply. Claire did not hear it clearly. She only felt the shift, the sudden change in posture, the way people straightened, faces rearranging into polite interest. The coordinator's expression changed completely. "I did not realize," she said, voice suddenly careful. He did not respond to that. He looked at Claire instead. "You are not the problem," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "But the way this situation has been handled is." Silence followed. Claire stood still, her breath shallow, as the truth began to surface around her. She still did not know exactly who he was, but everyone else was starting to. And the night was no longer about a gust of wind. It was about what people chose to do afterward. The host stepped onto the stage with a practiced smile, tapping the microphone gently until the low murmur of conversation faded. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice warm and confident, "thank you for joining us tonight." Claire stood near the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a row of tall cocktail tables. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, fingers laced together to stop them from shaking. She could still feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest, the sense that something larger than her was unfolding, and she had been caught inside it. She searched the crowd instinctively. He was there, standing a few feet back from the front row, posture relaxed, attention fixed on the stage. People around him shifted subtly, making space without realizing they were doing it. The host continued. "Tonight's event would not be possible without the vision and generosity of the individual who brought us all together." A ripple of anticipation moved through the plaza. Claire felt it too. "And now," the host said, "please join me in welcoming the founder and chief executive officer of Halstead Industries, the man behind tonight's initiative." He paused. "Mr. Daniel Halstead." For half a second, nothing happened. Then the crowd turned, all at once. Eyes shifted, bodies angled. Conversations died mid-breath. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. Daniel, the man who had stood in front of her, the man who had shielded her with his jacket, the man who had spoken calmly while others scrambled for control. He stepped forward as applause broke out, measured and growing louder with each step he took toward the stage. Not flashy, not hurried, just inevitable. Claire stood frozen as the truth settled into place. He was not a sponsor. He was not an investor. He was not simply important. He was the reason this event existed at all. Daniel accepted the microphone with a small nod, waiting until the applause faded on its own. "Thank you," he said. His voice carried easily, steady and clear. "I appreciate you all being here." He paused, scanning the crowd, not with arrogance, but with intent. When his gaze reached Claire, it stopped, just for a moment, long enough for her to know he had not forgotten her. "There are many reasons we host events like this," he continued. "To celebrate success, to build connections, to raise funds." He shifted his weight slightly, one hand resting against the podium. "But tonight," he said, "I was reminded of something more important." A murmur moved through the audience. "Power is not measured by titles," Daniel went on. "It is measured by how we respond when someone else is vulnerable." The event coordinator stiffened near the side of the stage. Daniel's voice remained calm, but every word landed with precision. "Earlier this evening, a young woman experienced an unexpected moment in front of all of us," he said. "And what followed revealed more about this room than the wind ever could." The plaza was completely silent now. "No one deserves to be humiliated for circumstances beyond their control," Daniel said. "And no one doing honest work should be made to feel small for simply being visible." Claire's throat tightened. She had not expected this. Not this public, not this direct. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not point fingers. He did not need to. "I take responsibility for the culture we create in spaces like this," he continued. "That includes how our staff, our partners, and our guests are treated." He glanced briefly toward the coordinator, then back to the crowd. "And let me be clear," he said, "disrespect has no place here. Not tonight, not ever." The silence stretched, heavy and undeniable. Then, slowly, applause began. Not the polite kind, not the kind people offered out of obligation. This was something else. Claire felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She stood straighter, her shoulders lifting as if some invisible weight had finally shifted. Daniel stepped back from the microphone, handing it to the host. As he turned, his eyes found hers again. This time, he did not look like a stranger. He looked like someone who had chosen to stand exactly where he was. And in that moment, with the truth finally revealed, Claire understood that what had begun as an accident had become something far more powerful. Not a scandal, a reckoning. The applause did not fade quickly. It rolled across the plaza in waves, steady and undeniable, filling the space where whispers and judgment had lived only minutes earlier. People clapped with purpose now, some out of agreement, some out of relief, some because it was suddenly clear which side of the moment they wanted to be remembered on. Claire stood still, absorbing it. For the first time that evening, no one was looking at her with curiosity or thinly veiled criticism. When eyes turned her way now, they carried something different: respect. Daniel stepped down from the stage without ceremony. There was no entourage, no rush of assistants pulling him in different directions. People made room for him instinctively as he moved through the crowd, not because he demanded it, but because presence like his created space. The event coordinator approached him first, posture rigid, face carefully composed. "Mr. Halstead," she said, her voice controlled but tight. "If there has been a misunderstanding, I would be happy to clarify." Daniel stopped walking. "There has been no misunderstanding," he replied calmly. She swallowed. "Our priority is maintaining the reputation of the organization. And mine," he said, "is maintaining its integrity." The word landed hard. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply met her gaze and held it. "Effective immediately," Daniel continued, "any staff member or guest who disrespects event personnel will be removed from future engagements." A few people nearby stiffened. "This applies to everyone," he added, "without exception." The coordinator nodded quickly. "Of course." Daniel did not acknowledge the response. He turned away, the conversation finished. Across the plaza, two guests who had been openly mocking earlier exchanged uneasy glances. One of them reached for a drink and knocked it over, spilling amber liquid across the stone. No one laughed this time. Daniel walked toward Claire. She straightened instinctively, unsure whether to speak first. "You handled yourself well," he said. "I did not do much," she replied honestly. "You did not disappear," he said. "That matters." She looked up at him, searching his face. "You did not have to say any of that. On stage, I mean." "Yes," he said. "I did." There was that certainty again. A security staff member approached, speaking quietly to Daniel, pointing toward the edge of the plaza where a small group was being escorted out. Phones were put away. Heads were lowered. The message was clear. Daniel nodded once, then turned back to Claire. "Are you scheduled to stay for the rest of the evening?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "if that is still all right." "It is," he replied. "And if anyone tells you otherwise, you come to me." The words were simple. The protection behind them was not. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been building in her chest all night. "Why?" she said. "Why step in like that for someone you do not know?" Daniel considered her for a moment. "Because," he said, "what happens to the least protected person in a room tells you everything about the room." She felt something shift inside her, something quiet and lasting. Around them, the event resumed, but the tone had changed. Conversations were softer, laughter more careful. People were more aware now of how they looked, how they acted, who might be watching. Not out of fear, out of accountability. Claire took a breath she felt like she had been holding all evening. For the first time, she did not feel like a temporary presence. She felt seen. And as Daniel stepped away to speak with a small group of donors, she realized something else had changed too. This was no longer just a story about a moment of embarrassment. It was a story about what happened after. And the night was far from over. The crowd began to thin as the evening shifted into its final phase. Guests drifted toward smaller conversations, their voices lower now, their laughter more measured. The energy of the plaza had changed from spectacle to reflection. What had happened earlier lingered in the air, unspoken but present, shaping how people moved and spoke. Claire finished her tasks quietly, collecting empty programs, straightening the registration table, returning borrowed items to their places. No one rushed her. No one corrected her. A few guests even thanked her on their way out, their words genuine instead of automatic. When her shift finally ended, she stepped away from the table and stood near the edge of the plaza, unsure what to do with herself now that there was nothing left to manage. Daniel found her there. He approached without urgency, hands relaxed, his presence no longer commanding attention, but still unmistakable. "You can go home," he said gently. "Your work is done." She nodded. "Yes. I was just gathering my things." She reached for her bag, then hesitated. The jacket. She had nearly forgotten. She held it out to him carefully. "Thank you for earlier, and for everything after." Daniel took the jacket, folding it over his arm the same way he had before. "You are welcome," he said, "but you did not owe me thanks." She looked at him, puzzled. "Why not?" "Because decency should not require gratitude," he replied. "It should be expected." She smiled softly at that, a real smile this time, one she did not have to measure or contain. "I will remember this night," she said, "probably for the rest of my life." Daniel met her gaze. "So will I." The words surprised her. She had not expected that. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city returning as the event dismantled itself piece by piece. Chairs were folded, lights dimmed, staff exchanged quiet goodbyes. "Claire?" Daniel said. She looked up quickly. He had not known her name before. "Yes? I would like to offer you something," he continued. "Not charity, not compensation for embarrassment." She stiffened slightly, old instincts flaring. "An opportunity," he said, anticipating her reaction. "If you are interested." She waited. "Our foundation runs community outreach programs," Daniel explained. "We work with event staff, service workers, people who are often invisible in high-profile spaces. We need coordinators who understand those environments from the inside." Claire listened carefully, heart pounding. "It would be paid," he added, "flexible, and if you say no, nothing changes." She took a breath. "Why me?" Daniel considered the question. "Because you stayed," he said. "You did not lash out. You did not shrink. You carried yourself with dignity when it would have been easier not to." She felt tears rise again, but this time she did not fight them. "I am not sure I am qualified," she admitted. "Most people worth hiring feel that way," Daniel said. She laughed quietly, surprised by the sound of it. "I would like to think about it," she said. "You should," he agreed. "Take your time." He handed her a card, simple, unembellished, his name, his number. "No pressure," he said, "just a door." She took it, fingers brushing the edge. As they parted, Claire walked away with her head high, the city lights stretching out before her. She was not certain what the future held, but she knew this much. That night, she had not been rescued from a moment. She had been recognized as someone who mattered, and sometimes that changed everything. The plaza was empty by the time Claire stepped onto the sidewalk. The last of the lights dimmed behind her, and the city reclaimed the space, traffic humming softly, streetlights casting long reflections across the pavement. She walked slowly, her bag resting against her hip, Daniel's card tucked safely inside, not as a promise but as a possibility. She replayed the night in fragments, the wind, the jacket, the silence when one man chose to stand. For years, she had learned how to shrink herself to fit into rooms that were never built for people like her. She had learned how to apologize before being blamed, how to disappear before being dismissed. Tonight had broken that pattern, not with noise, but with clarity. She had not been saved, she had been defended. Weeks later, Claire stood in a very different space, a modest office, natural light, a table scattered with folders labeled community outreach and event standards. The work was real, the pay was fair, the respect was consistent. She had accepted Daniel's offer after careful thought, not because of the man, because of the mission. Daniel kept his distance, professionally and personally. He did not hover, he did not interfere, he trusted her. When they spoke, it was about systems, not sympathy. About building environments where dignity was not optional. The first time she saw him challenge a senior executive for speaking dismissively to a junior staff member, Claire understood something important. That night had not been an exception. It had been his rule. At the next public event, Claire stood near the stage, not as temporary staff, but as a coordinator. She watched as a young server stumbled slightly while carrying a tray. No laughter followed. No phones rose. The culture had shifted. Daniel caught her eye across the room. He nodded once. That was all. Later, as the event wrapped and the crowd dispersed, they stood side by side near the exit, watching people leave. "You changed more than one night," Claire said quietly. Daniel looked at her. "You helped me see what needed changing." She smiled at that. Their story did not end with a grand gesture or a dramatic confession. It ended with something steadier, something earned, mutual respect, shared values, and a future that unfolded one deliberate choice at a time. As Claire walked out into the city once more, she did not feel small. She felt grounded, and somewhere behind her, a man who understood the true meaning of power watched the world he had helped shape move forward, knowing that the greatest impact often begins with one simple act: standing up.